Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Brent Jennings, and if you joined us a couple of weeks ago, we did a class on intersection safety in the same manner, and it really went over pretty successful. So LTAC declared victory, and here we are today to talk about road safety audits. We're going to find today that this is a formal process that independently examines the safety of current or future roadways and intersections by an independent audit team. The process identifies opportunities for improvements to safety for all road users, and the goal is to eliminate death and serious injury on all roadways in Idaho. So we went through some virtual Zoom housekeeping. Sorry for the little delay here. And so we'll get going. Okay. All right, so right off the bat, we're very interested in seeing who's joining us today and from what region of the state. It's kind of important for us to take a demographic. So I'm going to ask Don to go ahead and bring up our polling question. We'll have these polling questions throughout the day just to get a little bit of feedback and communicate with you. So with that, we'll see if the polling question can come up. If you can just take a moment, and there it is right there. So you are joining us from what region of the state today? North Idaho, which is Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene. Southwest, more of the Boise area. South Central can be thought of as Twin Falls, and Southeast, Pocatello, Idaho Falls, and up that way. So if you just take a minute and mark that, then Don will share the results with us.
And we're going to be having these polling questions kind of scattered throughout. Some of them will be just general information for us. Some of them might be a question geared towards a topic or an area that was just discussed in the course. So it's just a nice way to check in, make sure everybody's paying attention, and kind of find out a little bit more information about who's joining us. So I'm just waiting for one more person, it looks like. We'll give them about 10 more seconds. And the nice thing about these polls is after we're done, we can share it back with the group so everybody can see. All right, I'm going to end this poll and I'm going to share the results.
Okay, well, that's great. Thanks, Don. And, you know, there's a lot of people joining us from North Idaho today, which is great. And it looks like we kind of got a great mix here. Number from Southwest Idaho and Eastern Idaho is represented as well. So thanks, everybody, for joining us and participating in that poll. So as we move on, we want to talk just a little bit about the crash and the crash problem, not only in Idaho, but on the national level. It's interesting that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration indicates that there are over 50% of the fatalities on U.S. roadways occur in rural areas. And it's interesting because this figure is disproportionate since approximately only 23% live in rural areas, and rural roadways account for just 40% of all vehicle miles traveled nationally. So it is disproportionate, and and it kind of makes us stand up and say we really need to pay attention more to those local roads in those rural areas. This makes safety at rural non-signalized intersections and roadways even more important. And so when we look at the Idaho problem, I want to look at the crash data for just a moment. And the latest data that I have is from the crash report published from the Idaho Transportation Department in 2018. And this really kind of sets the tone for the problem in Idaho. There were over 24,000 reportable crashes in Idaho. And what I mean by reportable, it's a crash that either resulted in a fatality or an injury or property damage in excess of $1,500, and there was an official police report. We all know that there are probably a lot of fender benders that go unreported. And of those 24,000 some odd crashes, there are about 1,300 serious injuries. These injuries are typically of the type that they're life-changing injuries. You may never be the same again. There were 215 fatal crashes that resulted in 234 fatalities. So that tells me that there were some crashes out there that resulted in more than one fatality. And this is something that I found a little bit kind of staggering, if you will. The economic impact in Idaho is about $4.2 billion in 2018. And that's calculated by the cost of fatalities, serious injuries, and property damage. And for those of you who might not know, when we talk about with the actuarials, and as kind of morbid as it sounds, you do put a kind of a price on a person's head. Life is priceless. but in order to kind of do some calculations and look at the economic impact, about $9 million is the price tag for a fatality. So when you start adding all of this up, it comes up in Idaho to about $4.2 billion, which is about a $2,300 impact for every Idahoan. And so Idaho really kind of does deserve better. And you can almost think of this $2,300 per person as an impact, or I kind of put a label on it as a crash tax. And like all all taxes in Idaho, we are probably interested in lowering that crash tax. So just to kind of take it one step further, there were 215 fatal crashes statewide. 59 of those crashes were urban and 156 were rural, both on the state and the local highway system. If we break it down just a little bit further, there were 81 fatal crashes on the local system, and the highest fatalities were associated with single vehicle run off the road crashes and intersection. So kind of a little quiz, see what you guys think. I've got a next polling question that comes up. And so we're interested in knowing what you guys think. Idaho's largest number of fatalities are caused by intersection crashes or single vehicle run off the road crashes. So let Dawn bring that up. There it is. If you'll take a moment and go ahead and answer that, then we'll share the results with you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share our results with the group.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. It's almost kind of like a 50-50 mix. And these are the two prevalent crashes that cause the most fatalities in Idaho. But it looks like people lean towards the single vehicle run off the road crashes. And that is correct. It kind of, you would think that intersections would lead the way, but they're a close second. And the leading cause of single vehicle run off the road crashes is impaired driving in Idaho. So as you can see, we're very interested in focusing in on these two crash types, and roadway safety audits will lend itself to these two roadway types. So really kind of summing up the Idaho story is, where is Idaho going? Well, certainly we're very interested in eliminating death and serious injury in Idaho on all roadways, and we're interested in reducing the total economic cost of crashes. And so when you get to this, it kind of focuses in on, the towards zero deaths, which has been adopted by Idaho. And when we think about this, and if you were to join me in person today, I would simply ask the question, do you think we'll ever get to zero deaths? Kind of think about that for a moment. A lot of times people will share with me, no, I don't think we can. However, there are, and we're in the middle of one even right now, but there have been many diseases in the world that have been eradicated, but people thought they might not be. And so way into the future, we're hoping that zero will be the acceptable, because when I ask the question, well, what would be the acceptable level? 50%, 30% reduction, people will agree with that. But when I ask the question, how many deaths are acceptable within your family unit, the answer always comes back as zero. And it's interesting, the data takes us that some Idaho counties do go 1 month at zero, or even almost a year at zero. So progress is being made. So certainly worthy goal. And again, roadway safety audits are here to help us try to achieve that goal in the long run. So here's what we'll cover today. Local road agencies with a desire to improve the overall safety performance of their roadways can be excited about the concept of roadway safety audits. We will find out that an RSA program can range from something very simple, and I want to have everybody keep that in mind, that as we go through the next couple of days, that we want to keep this process as simple as possible. But it can be very simple, and it can be made a little bit more complex depending upon the project. So here's what we'll cover. We're going to cover an introduction to the roadway safety audit process. We're going to talk just a little bit about how you can implement a roadway safety audit within your agency and what that might look like. We'll have an overview of the roadway safety audit process, and we'll conduct roadway safety audits, and they kind of come in 3 flavors, and we'll dive into these details more as the hours wane on here. We'll talk about roadway safety audits during pre-construction phase if you're doing a new roadway project or a rehabilitation roadway project. We'll talk about how you can do roadway safety audits actually during construction. And then we'll talk about how roadway safety audits look in the post-construction phase, or if you're doing roadway safety audits on existing roadways or existing intersections. Towards the end, we have some prompt lists that we want to share with you that makes the roadway safety audit process a bit easier. And then we'll also dive in and look at some case studies as well. So it's important to understand that road state level, but it's catching on more and more at the local level as well. So it's important to understand that roadway safety audits are not traditional safety reviews. The differences between the traditional safety review and roadway safety audits, I'm going to cover that and I'm going to explain that a little bit later on, but it's good to keep in mind that roadway safety audits are not the traditional safety reviews that you might have done in the past. So are roadway safety audits economical? Well, conducting roadway safety audits and incorporating the recommended safety improvements in your designs is estimated to cost typically maybe 5% or even less of the overall cost of design, engineering fees, and so on. And of course, it does depend upon the size of the project and the complexity of the project. But the takeaway on that is that roadway safety audits and the costs of doing that are very low compared to the other costs that you'll encounter in your project. So conducting roadway safety audits earlier in the road project's life cycle, like say during preliminary design, actually bears a lot of fruit because you can start to incorporate the things that you discover in the audit into your designs if indeed a portion of your roadway is being designed. So it should be emphasized again that roadway safety audits can be done at any stage in a project, and then we'll also talk about how they can be done on existing roadways as well. So if advanced planning is done, then roadway safety audits can be performed with a minimal impact to your project schedule. Finally, when considering the economic cost of crashes, the return on investment of performing a roadway safety audit can be really significant. So it's been proven that there is a real good return on investment when roadway safety audits are performed. So when properly planned, conducting the roadway safety audit should be relatively easy. It's just, again, depending upon the size of the project. But if they're planned appropriately, it usually requires about 1 week or less than 1 week. The investment is a unique opportunity to draw upon the depth and breadth of knowledge of those represented on a diverse roadway safety audit team. And it's an excellent opportunity to reflect upon and, more importantly, document your decisions, your safety decisions, engineering safety decisions made regarding roadway and intersection safety. So roadway safety audits build on other roadway safety improvement strategies or techniques that you might already have within your agency. So we're not saying that roadway safety audits completely replaces those good things you might be doing with safety programs that you might already have in place within your agency, but a roadway safety audit will complement that as well. A structured roadway safety audits, are strategies and techniques that complement everything that you might already have in place. For instance, a structured rumble strip program that you already have in place can be complemented by the roadway safety audit process. So it's optimal to balance between reactive and proactive strategies in each jurisdiction, based upon your conditions. So as an example, a reactive strategy might be thought of as locating safety problem areas within a spot location approach. In other words, past crash history drives the decisions regarding safety, and this is typically done at intersections. And if you're with us at the last workshop that we did, we talked about the black spot technology or the black spot technique and how where the data took us to these intersections that had safety problems, we would always be looking at historical data and we would be in a reactive nature. Roadway safety audits tend to take us more towards a proactive approach or a systems approach, whereby your agency might be trying to look towards the future and prevent crashes from happening rather than reacting to the crashes that have already happened and try to do a fix up afterwards. So roadway safety audit programs tend to be more proactive in nature. So local road agencies implementing RSA should view them as one of an integrated range of tools intended to further the goals and objectives of any kind of comprehensive road safety program that you might already have in place. So here's our next polling question. So how many attending today also attended the intersection safety workshop that we gave on April 29th and 30th? Because these two workshops kind of go hand in hand, and we were kind of interested as to who our repeat audience might be. So there it is. We'll take a moment to go ahead and fill that out, and then Dawn will share the results with us.
Okay, last call. All right, we're gonna share the results.
Okay, well, that's great. It's interesting. Wow, look at that, a 50-50 mix. So 50% of you today were also with our intersection safety workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago. So you'll find when we were at the intersection safety workshop that some of what we're talking about today, you're going to see that it kind of goes hand in hand. So as mentioned earlier, I want to touch upon what a traditional safety review is and how it differs from the roadway safety audit. Most public agencies have an established traditional safety review process through a high hazard location type of a program or a program that attempts to correct safety problems within your roadway network. However, an RSA and traditional safety review are different processes. It is important to understand the difference. So here are the difference between the traditional safety reviews and the roadway safety audits. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up another screen here. I'm going to share this with you. Hopefully this will come up okay. Can everybody see this spreadsheet that I just brought up?
Yep.
Okay. So let's just take a moment and compare the process of roadway safety audits to traditional safety reviews. So in a roadway safety audit, it's usually performed by an independent group of individuals. It's independent of the project. Whereas the traditional safety review was a team that was usually not completely independent of the design team or of the agency team. So it was like, well, let's pile into the van, let's just drive through the proposed project site and see what we can spot from a safety standpoint. So the roadway safety audit, the whole idea behind that is to have an independent review done. It's performed by a multidisciplinary team. And what I mean by that, and as we unfold this today, we're going to find that some of the team come from the outside. They're not necessarily all highway district or highway agency members. That might be members from law enforcement, EMS, the business community, and so on. Where in a traditional safety review, they're typically performed by a team with only design and or safety expertise. In a roadway safety audit, the attempts are made to consider all roadway users. And when we think about all roadway users, we think about pedestrians, bicyclists, elderly drivers, so on. And so we look at all the other modes of transportation that we're faced with being able to accommodate on the roadways. And when we do traditional safety reviews, they often tend to concentrate on just the motorized traffic. Roadway safety audits account for road user capabilities and the limitations, and is an essential element of roadway safety audits. So it kind of takes into account some human factors and how humans react to the roadway and the roadway environment. Whereas traditional safety reviews normally don't consider much in the way of human factors. The roadway safety audit will discover as we go on, we'll generate a formal roadway safety audit report. The traditional, there might be a set of meeting minutes taken, trip minutes taken from the traditional safety review, but many times there's really no kind of formal reporting that's done. And also a formal response report is an essential element of the roadway safety audit from the project owner. And roadway safety audits, the traditional ones, typically do not generate any kind of a formal response report. So you can see the traditional is kind of more more loosely structured, and it also kind of generates or centers around just the agency itself. So the roadway safety audit has an opportunity to bring in other players, a fresh set of eyes to look at the safety problems that you might have in the project that you're contemplating building or reconstructing or upgrading. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint screen. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. All right. Okay, so we've kind of batted this new concept of the roadway safety audit around the room now. So kind of let's attempt to maybe come up with a little bit of a definition for roadway safety audit. So here's what the roadway safety audit definition might look like. And I'll just take a moment and read it to you. It can be a formal safety examination of existing or future road or intersection by an independent audit team. Safety of all road users is considered. And so I think it's a pretty good definition of the fact that it speaks to it's a formalized process that is kept simple, and it does take all the road users into consideration. So let's keep this definition in mind, and we'll kind of step back and look at it again as we proceed down the trail of roadway safety audits. So just a little bit of a summary about what roadway safety audits are. Number one, they are focused primarily on roadway safety. Okay. Roadway safety audits are a formal examination in a structured environment. Roadway safety audits are proactive, by and large proactive in nature rather than reactive, trying to look forward to solving future problems rather than reacting to the problems that have already taken place. It's very team diverse. It's not necessarily just a bunch of DOT or local highway agency employees. It is independent of a roadway design team if the project you're looking at is under design. It does consider all the roadway users that are out there. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the bicyclists, pedestrians, elderly drivers, so on. And it is formal with some reporting and responses from the agencies that the roadway safety audit is being done with. Conversely, roadway safety audits do not evaluate design work. And that's where the wheels tend to kind of fall off the cart sometimes. People, when they get into the roadway safety audit process, they'll kind of jump into, well, we're actually critiquing and evaluating somebody's design. The safety issues that you come up with as a result of the audit may change some of the design elements, but the primary purpose is not to review design and design work. It's not there to check the standards of compliance. It's certainly not there to rank projects or rate design options. It's certainly not there to redesign the project, but once again, some of the project might go under a little bit of a redesign phase based upon the results of incorporating some safety stuff that people weren't thinking of. And certainly the roadway safety audit does not perform crash investigations. That's best left up to law enforcement. So the big misinterpretation, and it's kind of an interesting point, is that compliance with design standards, while important, does not necessarily result in an optimal safety road design. And conversely, failure to achieve compliance with standards does not necessarily result in a design that's unacceptable from a safety perspective. What do I mean by all of that? So it might be that while, compliance with design standards may not necessarily result in optimal safety design. Let's take an example of where we've got a roadway and we've got like a steep embankment. And let's say we design a guardrail and we put the guardrail in to keep the cars from going off into the embankment. However, we might be introducing a new hazard called the guardrail. The guardrails, although they're there to keep us safe, actually do pose, in many instances, in some instances, as a road hazard. It might be that we have an opportunity maybe to flatten the slope and take the guardrail out, yet people have an opportunity to recover. So while we're kind of deviating away maybe from a standard, we might be optimizing safety just a little bit more. So just kind of keeping that in mind, confusing roadway safety audits with design quality control is a common misinterpretation. So there's a lot of latitude that can be used in the road safety audit process. So here are the two big questions. The aim of the roadway safety audit is to address and answer these two questions. So let's just take the time for just a moment to ponder these questions and respond to them. And so I just want to go over them. The roadway safety audit really needs to answer these two questions, and we keep coming back to them. What elements of the roadway presents a safety concern? And to what extent? To which road users? Under what circumstances? It's kind of an interesting question. We're talking about roadway elements. To the extent of those elements, how it affects various users, and what are the circumstances? The second question that we attempt to answer with the roadway safety audit is what opportunities exist to eliminate or mitigate identified safety concerns? So what I'd like to do is turn it back over to Dawn, and I want to go into a chat room. So we're going to experience chat rooms, everybody. So, and chat rooms we used, and they worked out really, really nice. So there it is. We want to just break into some groups and discuss these two questions. And I suggest kind of look for some common elements. So with that, there's the two questions on the screen that I want everybody to focus in on and kind of discuss amongst yourselves. And we'll be back to talk about those. So Dawn, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I copy and pasted those into the chat box. The formatting came out kind of funny, but that way you guys will have those questions there as a reference. I'm gonna go ahead and break you out into some rooms. So it'll look like the screen that you're on now, but there'll only be 5 or 6 people in your group. So you guys will go through your first question, kind of go around and try to get everybody to feedback on that, and then pick one person from your group that could be your spokesperson. And then when we return back to the larger group, we'll go through. I think we're gonna just split up into 4 rooms so that it'll be easier for reporting back. We'll have 4 different groups. I'm gonna go ahead and create those rooms, and I'm going to open them up. Okay, welcome back everybody to the group. Thank you guys for participating in those breakout sessions. So we asked that one person from each of the 4 groups kind of just talk a little bit about what things your group came up with.
Okay, I can hop on first if that's okay. So some of the elements that we came up with were speed limits, approaches, appropriate signage, the condition of the road, sight distance, curvature, slope, obstacles, and shatter strips and paint striping, and that kind of thing. And then how we would mitigate that, throw out more appropriate signage, guardrails. You can widen the road, make sure you're putting appropriate treatments and doing proper road maintenance, mowing and spraying. You could also do public outreach to let them know where the dangerous areas are. And then we talked about roundabouts and widened intersections. Thank you.
And that group covered most of what we had. We also talked about the geometrics, and a couple things to mitigate it would be obviously construction if we have the funds for it, but on the pedestrian side, adding sidewalks, ADA ramps, refuge islands, guardrails, and things like that to help mitigate accidents.
On ours, we did potholes, alligator cracks, angles like limited visibility, your shoulders, dense brush where you can't see like wildlife if you're up in the mountains and stuff like that. And then to eliminate or mitigate it, what everybody else talked about, paint, signs. It's kind of expensive improvements that help out everything, and that's about all we got.
I think Nick should be made our honorary spokesman. He covered most of ours as well. Hi, Nick.
Good seeing you, Kent.
Is there another group that would like to discuss what they came up with?
I think that covered all four if Kent's group didn't have anything additional to add.
Okay.
Well,
Okay, no, that's great. And let's see, I need to, I think, do I? Okay. All right, everybody should be able to see my screen. So anyway, no, so I think that was really great discussion, and you can see that you found some common elements. And what I liked was that, you know, you were able to point out some of those very low cost, high return on investment type of mitigation measures. And one of the things that I might want to offer up too on the opportunities that exist to eliminate or mitigate was also through this process. And I want you to think about this as we kind of unravel or kind of peel back the onion more, is as we go through this formalized process, that we have an opportunity to put together something on paper that comes from a diverse team so people have confidence in what we're doing. And also, it's an opportunity to be able to perhaps seek funding sources to improve safety on our system. And we're not just going out there to seek funding saying, well, if you just give us funding, we know where we're going to go spend it. You can kind of really focus in on, we went through a formalized process and we discovered all of these things that we really need to pay attention to from a safety standpoint. And we can do that, but perhaps we can need some help from some funding. So again, this process can also maybe help in that realm if you're maybe trying to struggle with ways to structure, you know, your funding and your programs that would go ahead and support that funding. So, okay, so with that in mind, we've discussed what an RSA program is and more importantly, what it's not. So I want to chat just a little bit about the implementation of a roadway safety audit program within your agency, okay? So an RSA program can range from something very simple, and again, we're really putting the emphasis on simple, to a full integration of safety into every stage of each project. And so some agencies, maybe even larger agencies, if they have large projects, they will look at safety at every stage as the project develops. But the overall goal really is to highlight how simple and completely customizable an RSA program can be, you know, and to encourage the implementation of a program that fits within your safety goals or your organization's safety objectives. So here it is. We have another polling question that we would like you to consider and respond to. Has your agency ever utilized or performed a formalized roadway safety audit? There it is. We'll just give you a few minutes to respond to that, and then Dawn will share the results.
So the polling question that's up right now is, has your agency ever utilized or performed a formalized road safety audit? So there is the option for don't know. So we're looking at yes, no, or don't know. And we're just waiting for a few more people to respond on that. So has your agency ever utilized or performed a formalized RSA, a road safety audit? All right, we're going to close this poll up and share the results.
Okay, well that's interesting. About a quarter of you have said yes, that you have utilized or performed, and that's great. 29% no, so that means that there's opportunity to consider roadway safety audits in the future, and 47% don't know. So hopefully towards the end of the day, or actually the end of tomorrow, will know all about roadway safety audits. You'll all become champions, and you'll look at maybe utilizing a roadway safety audit in your program. So thanks for responding to that poll. So as we continue on with the implementation of roadway safety audits, so here's some big takeaways really to kind of keep in mind regarding implementation of a roadway safety audit program. It can range from the simple to complex. If somebody comes bombing through the door and says, oh my gosh, we can't do a roadway safety audit because it's just too complex for us, that's not a true statement. It can be customized, and as you get into a roadway safety audit program more and more, you'll find out how customizable it can be. And certainly it does complement and support any existing agency safety goals that you may have in mind. So with that, we're going to jump right back into one more polling question. So here it is. How many of you out there, or how many agencies have established roadway safety programs and or roadway safety goals? And what I mean by that is that you have some type of a goal setting process that within our roadway network or within our organization, we are going to improve roadway safety by, and you've got some kind of a metric. You're going to reduce crashes by a certain number, reduce crash rate, fatalities, and so on. So what we'd like you to do is answer this poll question. How many agencies represented here today have established roadway safety programs or roadway safety goals?
Okay, last call for how many agencies represented here today have established roadway safety programs and or roadway safety goals. So we do have the option for don't know. So please respond to this question with a yes, a no, or a don't know. We're just waiting on a few more people. All right, last call, closing the poll.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. We've got quite a mix, about a third, that a third of you are saying that yes, we do have some kind of a safety program or specific roadway safety goals. That's really great. A third of you say, well, no, we don't. And perhaps a roadway safety audit process will maybe help you establish safety programs or future goals. And then we've got close to a third that don't know whether you have goals or not. So it's really interesting that it kind of came out a third. So again, as we go through our time together, the roadway safety audit process might help those who don't have established safety program or goals to really kind of think about that and think about the establishment of that. So as we look at the overview of the process, you can call your roadway safety audit program really anything you want. Most people refer to it as roadway safety audits. Some will say, well, it's a roadway safety assessment, roadway safety evaluations, roadway safety impact teams. Really doesn't matter. You don't necessarily have to call it roadway safety audit. But let's talk just a little bit about how in the world do we get a roadway safety audit or roadway safety audit process started? Okay. What is the element of a roadway safety pilot, and what might that pilot look like? What about a policy to kind of help guide us in this process? Let's look at the cost benefits, and then we're going to touch just a little bit upon some of the legal, because I'm sure by now some of you are kind of raising your hands and saying, where does the legal process kind of fit into all of this? And we'll discuss that as well. So these are the steps of performing a well thought out roadway safety audit, and each one of these steps will be presented and discussed a little bit later. So this is what the process will look like when we get the roadway safety audit underway. Each step is very important, and none of the steps should be skipped. If a step is not addressed during your roadway safety audit, then you don't have a good roadway safety audit, or you don't have a really valid roadway safety audit. So we'll be going over each one of these steps a little later, probably tomorrow, and we'll be really drilling down into the details. But I just wanted to kind of share this process with you. as we talk about how we're going to implement a roadway safety audit process within your organization. So getting the roadway safety audit process started doesn't have to be real complex, but there are some elements that need to take place, especially if you've never done this before. So before we get into the specific detailed steps of performing the roadway safety audit, we need to look at how to start a roadway safety audit. The first roadway safety audit a local road agency might perform should be simple and really can be looked at as treating it as a pilot. It's very important, and this is the big one, it's very important that management makes a commitment to try the roadway safety audit process. I would dare say if you don't have a commitment of those management or those decision makers, then your roadway safety audit process or your pilot process might be doomed from lifting off from the launch pad. So it's important that management makes a commitment to try that roadway safety audit process. Also, creation of a very simple policy is something to keep in mind, although it is a bit optional. It's important that suggested that a simple policy be created that really kind of governs the roadway safety audit process. And when you craft this policy, it can kind of be crafted around with what are some of the criteria for using a roadway safety audit process? Will it be when traffic gets to a certain volume? Will it be when a section of roadway experiences a certain number of crashes or crash rate? Or intersections experience a number of crashes or crash rate? And then we'll kick in to do a roadway safety audit to really try to uncover what's going on. So it's strongly suggested that perhaps a simple policy be created. It is equally important that a skilled RSA leader be engaged, and training of the RSA team should take place for the first or pilot RSA project. It's going to help a great deal if your agency has an identified RSA champion within your organization. And they initially don't have to know a whole lot about the roadway safety audit process, but there's someone that's willing to take on this process and really take ownership of it and say, I want to learn this. So it's great to have an identified champion, and it's someone who is to begin learning that process and how to apply it. And it's more importantly that this champion be allowed to take ownership of the RSA process within your organization. So this champion, again, does not have to be an expert, but it's somebody that believes in the importance of highway safety and has an open mind and is willing to learn. So just one more slide and we'll just take a little break here then. So let's drill down just a little bit further and let's take this pilot concept on one step further. So conducting an RSA pilot typically involves the following steps. Again, we've talked about management commitment. It's vitally important that we have this and an open mind. Appointing an RS coordinator who is empowered to manage the pilot project. This person needs to be enthusiastic about the roadway safety audit process and have an ability to kind of be a team builder and bring together and manage a multidisciplinary team. Because we're going to find out as we continue uncovering the details that bringing a team and managing a team is going to be very important to success. Selecting a project that has data-driven issues, yet is simple in nature. So a good pilot example might be that a simple intersection that's undergoing a redesign and has some safety issues and the data kind of takes us there, that might be a good pilot project to start focusing in on. Select a good RSA leader. If one does not exist within your agency, you may need to hire someone to lead your pilot RSA process. And I would say find someone who has the heart of a teacher. And what I mean by that is if you're hiring someone to come in and help you with the RSA process, getting that up off the ground and to help your champion learn the RSA process, they need to be willing to sit down and teach you about the RSA process and just not come waltzing through the door and perform the RSA for you. So if you do hire someone as an RSA leader for your pilot, I would encourage you to write into their scope of work that they must provide RSA training in addition to leading that RSA pilot. I think that's very important if you're going to sustain this type of program. So selecting and training the right roadway safety audit team is important for the initial success, and this needs to be given a lot of thought. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about team selection and who those players should be. And the RSA pilot needs the ability to gather data, some roadway data, safety data, historical data, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on that as well. So these are the essential elements for starting our RSA pilot. And I would say the big takeaways would be the management commitment, start real simple, be sure you have a skilled leader on board that has the heart of a teacher and the ability to gather that information. So with that, we've been going for about an hour right now. So why don't we just take about, let's take 5 minutes. Let's just get up and stretch. I know it's hard to kind of sit there and look at a computer screen, especially look at me. So, so let's take 5 minutes and let's come back when the big hand is on. Okay, so I should still have my screen up, and there it is. Okay, so we've had poll questions and we've had some chat rooms. So we're going to introduce a little bit of a new concept called a challenge question. We'll have a couple of these along the way. I sound like a game show host, you know, it's like a challenge question time. Okay, so here we are. What I'd like you to do is, again, kind of go back into your chat rooms, your groups, and to consider this question. Should take the S off, okay? And I want you to talk about this amongst yourselves, and then when we come back, I really want to have a pretty good discussion. I would really like to hear your feedback about what are the roadblocks you and your agency may encounter to implementing a pilot roadway safety audit. We've kind of defined what that pilot might look like and how we've defined some implementation. We have agencies today that range from large to medium to small. So we would be interested in knowing what are the roadblocks you and your agency may encounter to implementing a pilot RSA. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dawn.
Okay, so I also put that question in the chat box because as we go out to our breakout sessions, I don't think we can see it, but today for this one, we just have one. So what are the roadblocks you and your agency may encounter? I'm going to split you back into your groups. So it should be the same groups that you were in before. You're going to be out there for 5 minutes, and then it'll give you the warning to come back to the main session. Make sure that you have that one spokesperson ready to kind of get the. Okay, everybody should be joining back.
So is Nick going to steal everybody's thunder again?
We kicked him out. We kicked him out of the groups. He had to wait out here with
Someone
us.
kick Nick out of ours. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So we're looking for kind of what happened in your discussions in regards to the roadblocks that you and your agency encounter, that may encounter when implementing a pilot RSA. So we have 4 groups. If we could maybe just go through in the same order we did last time, except Nick wasn't there.
Yeah, Nick wasn't in our group because I was going to nominate him again. He wasn't there, so I got nominated. So we had in our group, we had leadership management, whether they're on board, budget or money available, manpower. Is it ongoing or a one-time deal? Technical expertise on how to perform it. Do we have that in our agency? And then public buy-in or input with, especially when you're an agency that is with elected officials. So if you don't have the public buy-in, and it's hard for elected officials to give the go-ahead. So that was our list.
We had some similar things, such as lack of leadership and having enough agency members to take on the responsibility, of course, the time and the money that's involved, and for the agency to understand RSAs and the benefit of having one. There might be issues of where to begin, and gathering a large enough team to communicate, especially getting the people outside the agency, such as law enforcement and everything involved. And then also we had an example of a district hiring an engineering department to do an RSA, and having an engineering firm, there's not really the boots on the ground, so that might have a little bit of disconnect. Those who are working on the roadways might not be a part of the RSA.
Okay, I'll go for our group. Like a lot of other people, resources, getting the team together, since they are supposed to come from outside places, can be hard to get everyone to commit the time. Small agencies, someone mentioned, might not have the resources to commit someone to see this process through. And Another observation is understanding what an RSA does and does not do. Sometimes people are looking for something more like a traffic study or things like that, and that's not one of the things that can come out of an RSA well. So just making sure it matches what they're looking for. That's all.
The first thing my group said was they blamed the commission. And they'll give you the rest of the answers. I just wanted to put that one right out there.
We come up with a lot of the same as everybody else. Manpower, money, responsibilities, stuff like that. You know, Shannon there, she nailed it all on the head pretty much. Same that goes with our division out here. You know, we're pretty small, so it's just time and money and manpower, it seems like, for a lot of us here.
Thank you.
I have a question for Dawn. I heard that there was a request that I not be in any of the groups with other ACHD employees. Is that really true?
That did not get all the way to me, at least.
Nope, I haven't heard anything like that.
Must have been filtered out along the way. It was filtered. It didn't get to us.
Okay.
We'll pass it back to Brent.
All right, well, very good. Yeah, those are all good and valid discussion points. And I think hitting on a couple of these as we kind of, again, get more and more into the details. Savannah, I think, was talking about, and some others as well, as having the right people at the table. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but you're going to hear me talk about the Fab 3 that always needs to be part of a roadway safety audit. And that includes the people, individuals who operate and maintain the highway. And so I'll be getting into that a little bit more later. I also heard about, you know, time and making that time commitment. And especially when you're doing a pilot to begin with, it does take a bit of a time. There is a little bit of a learning curve. And committing someone to try to be your champion and kind of help the process along. I didn't hear a lot about funding. You know, they do cost a little bit of money, but in the big scheme of things, you can tend to budget for that. So as we look at that, we see some of the roadblocks. And I think some of it too is making sure that the management, those that are who's maybe set policy within the organization, recognize that there's some value to trying this, and they make that commitment to be supportive of that. So with those kind of comments, are there any other follow-up comments? You know, this was our challenge question, our opportunity to kind of maybe discuss just a little bit more. We've got 2 or 3 minutes that if anybody else would like to kind of chime in with any kind of afterthoughts, we'd like to hear that. Don't all jump at once. Okay. Well, I think some of those elements are real important to getting these things up and off the ground and going. So let's see, do I need to share my screen back here? All right, so let's see here. We'll share my screen. Everybody should be able to see that. Challenge question number 1. And let's see if we can get it to advance here. There we go. All right. So although it's optional, creation of an RSA policy, even a simple one, has value. The key elements of a policy need to be setting forth some of the criteria for selecting the project that you want to do, especially on a pilot. I would suggest you try to tally that back to some kind of data. In other words, when our section of roadway hits a certain number of crashes, maybe a certain number of injuries or fatalities, we'll want to do an audit. It also documents the procedures for conducting and documenting the RSA. So it just kind of outlines just a little bit of a procedural type of process. And then it provides a little bit of guidance to provide RSA and RSA training to the team and to those within your organization. You know, so we want to keep in mind that as your RSA program potentially grows, your policy will go along with that and update that. It's always nice to kind of have a little bit of a policy because everybody has something to go back to and they can be kind of singing off the same sheet of music when it comes to managing the RSA process. So it's important to recognize and communicate RSA successes to others as you move forward. So this assures that the people who are managing your organization will perhaps continue to support the RSA process if you're experiencing some successes. And it's been my experience as I've been involved with the process and leading some of these, is that communication of success is very important. And it's also very important to be able to kind of key in on those low cost, high return type of investments and see what you're getting in the way of being able to monitor the progress you're making 1 year out, 3 years out, 5 years out, and so on. And you kind of continue to visit those improvements that you've made to see if you're getting good, positive results. So roadway safety audits can be applied to just about any highway project that you have out there, improvement project. They can be done with capital improvement projects, and those tend to be larger projects where we're going to reconstruct something. Typically, there may be some federal aid that's involved, and I will say that the Federal Highway Administration clearly supports wholeheartedly the roadway safety audit process, so you're not going to have any difficulty with them when it comes to doing roadway safety audits. They fit really nicely with rehabilitation projects. If you're just rehabilitating the pavement surface itself, or you're going out and also rehabilitating the roadside appurtenances, guardrails, slopes, those types of things. And so they lend themselves really well to rehabilitation projects as well as surface improvement projects. And they can drill down real easily into being able to improve signage and pavement marking and so on. Typically, we don't think about roadway safety audits being applied to bridge projects, but they can be applied to bridge projects from the standpoint as if you're going to redo a bit of a widening or redo the bridge deck, that there's a need to be able to look at the data and do we need to accommodate, say, other road users such as pedestrians and bicyclists to help get them across bridges. Sometimes the bridges, especially the older ones, might tend to be pinch points if we're trying to get from point A to point B. Certainly safety projects, they utilize federal funds. They already emphasize a focus on safety. However, they may focus on just that reactive type of safety. We're going to look at the data and we're going to try to address the problems of the past. Where roadway safety audits try to be proactive and try to predict those safety items that might be happening in the future and counteract that so we don't have future problems occurring. And then the last one I want to kind of touch upon is a bit perhaps maybe new to some people, but you can also apply roadway safety audits to land developer type projects. Experience indicates that roadway safety audits of developer-led projects may offer enormous opportunities and benefits. However, developer resistance, to these iterative reviews and redesigns need to be recognized and managed. In short, let's face it, and I'm not knocking the land development industry at all, but sometimes they're not too wild to begin with to finance roadway improvements to their developments, and they may become a little bit less wild when it comes to doing roadway safety audits on their improvements. But if we're able to look at safety as these development projects are taking place, we're able to incorporate some of those things that sometimes we end up actually incorporating later. However, when those things are incorporated later, it might be the agency that's picking up the tab, maybe the developer. So anyway, just kind of food for thought. We're going to talk about land development type projects just a little bit later on. We'll get into just a little bit more detail. So project selection, as experience is gained in the process, your agency can modify the project selection criteria. And again, this is typically done by having a good policy in place that kind of outlines this criteria. And the policy can be as simple or as complex and it's dependent upon the agency and how simple or complex that you might want to make this. But again, any project can be selected. Just to kind of recap, you can do a RSA at any project phase in planning, during the design, or on existing roadways. It's flexible. You can make your own decision as to when you want to do these. And the selection criteria can and does change over time. So as we start to really look at this now, we start to pull this whole program together and this whole roadway idea of roadway safety audits together, we can see the potential benefits of improving roadway safety. And so here are some of the benefits that start to kind of bubble towards the surface. We're now proactively addressing safety. We're really trying our best to prevent things from happening rather than cleaning up the things from the past. Hopefully, these benefits will yield fewer and less severe crashes. And many times these improvements can be on the low cost side of things with a high return on investment. But I think just as importantly too, we start thinking as we start looking at our existing roadways and our roadway network, as we look at redesigns or reconstruction, we really start to promote now a little bit more of a safety culture, that we don't want to leave safety behind for the sake of just moving motorized traffic. And so our safety skills and knowledge start to become more advanced as a result of this. And so feedback for the future, what is working and what is not working, becomes very important. And again, as we zoom out to the big picture, we're very interested in eliminating death and serious injury on all of our roadways and supporting towards zero deaths. So people will step back and say, well, gee whiz, Brent, you know, if I undertake this process, what is this going to do to my project schedule if indeed you're going to apply this to a project that's being designed? So impacts to a project schedule can vary when an RSA is performed. The impact depends largely on the complexity of the project, how the RSA program is organized, and most importantly, when the RSA is done in the project life cycle. You know, the scope and implications of suggestions which result from the RSA and how those suggestions are addressed will also impact your schedule. Local agencies can fully understand these schedule implications before starting the process. And so if you think about from the very beginning, if you're designing a process or redesigning a project or a section of roadway, if you think about wanting to do an RSA project or an RSA process, you can certainly dial that into your project schedule. And you can accommodate that, especially, you know, if you have lead times, you know, for changes in project scope, right-of-way acquisition, design revisions. The earlier you can introduce this RSA process into the design process, the better off you are. So let's just take an example. If we're doing, say, preliminary layout in a design or conceptual, you might be a little early in doing an RSA because you really don't know what that project might look like. But when you get to the 30% point of a design, it's probably a good idea to start bringing that RSA process forward because you've got enough of the design work done that the team, the independent RSA team, can understand what the project looks like, and they can start visualizing how that project will function from a safety standpoint, and then they can go to work doing their audit. Again, this is on projects that you may be designing, sections of roadway. RSAs can certainly be done, as we will see later, on existing roadways or existing intersections. But as you look at how the project schedule is impacted, if you plan ahead for the RSA process, it's been the experience that project schedules really are not impacted that much. But one other thing is, regardless of the costs and benefits to a project, other agencies who've been performing RSAs suggest that the benefits of the RSAs can be substantial. However, they can be a bit immeasurable. It's kind of hard to put a yardstick on these things sometimes, especially in the early stages, since the future may be hard to predict. Nevertheless, the major quantifiable benefits of the RSAs can be identified in the following areas. Throwaway costs. I've been around for quite a while in this industry. I didn't really introduce myself in the beginning, but I was 31 years at the Idaho Transportation Department. And I'm sure just like you, we've seen things that we've built only to just kind of maybe tear down early and rebuild because it looked great on paper, but it didn't pan out real well in the real world. So throwaway costs and reconstruction costs to correct safety deficiencies identified once roads are in service are either avoided or substantially reduced. Life cycle costs are reduced since safer designs often carry lower maintenance costs, we hope. Instead of being able to maintain the guardrail year in and year out because it gets hit all the time, maybe the slope that's flattened, that's a little better to maintain, and yet people can have a chance to recover from running off the roadway in a safe manner. Societal costs of collisions are reduced for safer roads, so there's fewer collisions, and especially when it comes to severe injuries and fatalities, there's quite a cost coming back to our $4.2 billion impact in the year 2018. And this last one is a bit interesting. Liability claims maybe could be reduced. Liability complaints are both a component of agency and societal costs. So as we pick up on the things we need to think about and implement into our projects to make the roadway safer, perhaps there's an opportunity to see liability claims reduced as well. So the cost of the RSA, the potential cost of RSA, sometimes scares some people, but it should never scare anybody. It does vary by the project size, scope, and complexity. It depends upon the composition of the RSA team and the level of the detail of the audit. The cost of human resources, and we talked about that just a little bit during our challenge question. It might be being able to free up the resources and have the time and commitment to do that. It's been our experience, my experience, that, and you'll see as we get into team selection, that those that we're asking to come from the outside might be coming from other agencies, and so they're willing to donate this individual's time and pay them for that, and maybe even pay some of their other outside costs, such as transportation and meal costs as well. So those who participate may be from other agencies, such as law enforcement or EMS, as they tend not to charge for their time. And in fact, it's been my experience that sometimes when you invite others from the outside, they're saying, oh, wow, this is great. I wished I could be involved on earlier projects. Thank you for inviting me. And they really are very grateful in many cases to be able to come on board and contribute to safety. Again, I want to emphasize that your RSA team leader, especially if you're doing a pilot, needs to be someone who's very experienced with RSAs and also has a bit of a heart of a teacher and is willing to do some training with the RSA process within your organization. So in most cases, to begin with, in many cases in the local agencies, your leader might initially come from the outside through the consultant ranks, or maybe from another agency with someone who has RSA experience. But over time, if you're really serious about this process and you've identified a champion, you'll have somebody who will begin to take on this process and manage it. So some are concerned about legal issues. Let's face it, we live in a legal society. Liability is one of the major driving factors, though, in performing a good audit. It demonstrates a proactive approach to identify and mitigating safety concerns. It's important to note that when findings cannot be implemented, an exception report is developed to address this liability and mitigating measures. And tomorrow I'm going to go over what this report might look like. So if you're identifying safety issues, but you're not able to address those safety issues in an immediate manner, there are some steps you can take to lessen or eliminate your liability for not doing so at that time. Attorneys agree that once safety issues are identified and financial limitations are noted, and most of the time that is a limitation, is finances, how much and how fast that you can correct the issues brought forth by the audit, when it's properly documented as to why you can't do things in a certain manner in a certain time frame, that your liability lessens a great deal. The exception report or report on why a project cannot be implemented in the near term becomes important and is part of the agency response to the roadway safety audit. And I'll be covering that in a little bit more detail tomorrow as to what that might look like. So don't let liability issues necessarily scare you away from conducting the roadway safety audit. That's the takeaway that I'm trying to bring forward. So just to kind of review, to summarize, here are the essential elements. roadway safety audits again, as we look backwards as to what we've discussed so far, is that formal examination. It's a formalized process. It's done by a team, a multidisciplinary team, those brought in from outside of the agency as well as agency personnel, but it's independent. It's independent from the agency, and especially if you're having your project designed, it's independent from that design team. We want to think really hard as to what we're trying to achieve, and that was brought forward during our challenge question, is focusing in on the roadway safety issues and what is it that we're really trying to achieve by doing a roadway safety audit. We want to be sure and include all users of the roadway. Always try to be very proactive in nature. When we bring forward our safety discussions, it's qualitative in nature. And we'll discuss in more depth that field reviews are essential elements of an RSA. And someone who comes waltzing through the door and say that you do not need to do a field review as part of your RSA, you need to walk. You don't need to run away from that individual, because they don't know what they're talking about when they're talking about RSAs. So it kind of begs the question, well, gee whiz, Brent, what if we're doing an RSA, but we're just doing some preliminary design? And if we do a field review, we just have stakes in the ground. Well, if you have somebody along for the ride who can kind of explain the engineering, and you've got some drawings that you can lay out, and I'll talk about more of this later on tomorrow, that you still have the benefit of being able to do a field review and get some value out of your roadway safety audit. So who conducts these things anyway? You know, what do they look like? What does the team look like? So we want to focus in on the number of team members and how that's important. One of the benefits of the process is the synergy that's created by the audit team. The knowledge and experience of the team as a whole is greater than the sum, as these attributes, come from individual members. So it's the whole process that benefits by being conducted from the team. So what size of the team is optimal? I'll submit to you that 3 members is probably not enough. 25 members is way too much. It kind of becomes, a camel is a horse built by a committee type of situation. An optimal number, experience has said that 7 to 9 or 10 individuals is about the maximum size. And the reason we say this is because the team can function well together. They can write reports well together. They don't tend to get really bogged down. It just seems to be a really good number to be able to efficiently perform an RSA. The team background is very important. We'll have a very diverse group coming together, as we'll find out. And I want to touch again and kind of start to introduce the concept of the Fab 3. The Fab 3 should always be represented on our RSA team. This doesn't come from any textbook. It comes from the experience that I will share with you, the experiences that I have had with RSAs. And here are the Fab 3 that should always be part of an RSA. Is somebody from law enforcement, somebody who has jurisdiction over that section of roadway, somebody from emergency medical services, always has value contributions. And here's the most important one: somebody somebody who operates and maintains the highway, those who do maintenance worker. And why do I say that? If we were all together in the room, I'd probably open that up into a question. Maybe I should have that as a chat question, but I say that because who better knows the roadway? Certainly not me. I'm an engineer. I'm just a dumb old engineer that sits over in the corner in the office, and I may get out occasionally, okay? But those 3 individuals, the Fab 3, law enforcement, EMS, especially maintenance, who better knows the roadway? Because you live the roadway, you breathe the roadway, you've seen these crashes, but more importantly, you've seen the near misses. And you kind of scratch your head and say, why can't we do something about this? So when an RSA comes together and the team is selected, it's my strong opinion that those 3 need to be represented, those 3 disciplines. And then you can branch out from there. You can say, okay, if we're in an urban setting, maybe we want somebody from the business environment. Certainly we want somebody, if we're designing the project, the design engineer or a design engineer to come along and talk about design stuff, maybe some traffic operations stuff. And you can kind of round out your team, because remember, this is a very customizable type of a process, okay? The team needs to remain independent, and certainly take a look at having some local representatives or local representation. Advocacy groups, I've seen RSAs where a team member might have an advocacy group. You have to be a bit careful that they're there with an open mind to talk about safety, perhaps rather than get on a soapbox and talk about their advocacy or their advocated type of position. So a little bit of caution goes into some of this selection, but again, I'll come back and say the Fab 3 should always be represented. Okay. So local level RSA team, here's maybe some suggested members. You might have somebody from a neighboring agency come in with a fresh set of eyes. They might give an independent type of perspective. If you're into some real heavy commuter traffic type of situation, maybe some commuter organization, maybe the MPO. I know Idaho has, I think 4 or 5 MPOs. Maybe somebody will come on board if you have a project that's dealing with transit and transit type of issues. Maybe you're a very urban setting in a local business district, so there might be business associations. Maybe there's somebody that would be interested in coming forward with that. Certainly, people from LHTAC, ITD, or FHWA are always, I think, willing to be part of that. Consulting engineer, if they're designing the project, perhaps can help explain the design. Maybe somebody, again, if you've never had an RSA before and you need some leadership, perhaps some consulting there. And of course, EMS, maintenance workers, and law enforcement, which is the third bullet down. Those are the musts. So.
Hey Brent, we had a suggestion for school bus drivers.
Excellent. I would love
great knowledge.
Yes, that is very excellent. So whoever said that, you get like the gold star of Idaho, because I'm going to add that to the list. So thank you, whoever brought that forward. Because again, it's kind of along the mindset of who's living and breathing the roadway on a daily basis, who sees the potential safety issues that are out there. So with that, let's go to another polling question. As a person who works in roadway operations and maintenance, do you consider yourself a first responder?
So the polling question that we have up right now is, as a person who works in the roadway operations and maintenance, do you consider yourself a first responder? And Brent, I'm curious if people answer differently now after your last class, because you asked the question then and maybe they just hadn't considered it before.
Yeah, that would be good to look at, go back and look at.
Dawn,
Mm-hmm.
there was another question in the chat box from Art. Did you already address that?
He sent me one privately that I answered.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
And then I think Kent just, oh, he wants to. I'm not going to read Kent's.
Okay, so we're going to close this poll up and we're going to share those responses.
Excellent. Yes, person who works in roadway operations and maintenance. Yes, most definitely. I believe that you're a first responder. In fact, the law was written, the move over law, didn't necessarily have maintenance workers involved before, and I think that law has changed recently to include maintenance workers in the move over. And you've seen the signs, you know, when there's an incident on the roadway to move over and slow down and move over. It's the law. So yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. In fact, you find yourself sometimes happening upon crashes in your first one there. I remember the B truck crash in District 2 up US 12, I think it was, up towards Lolo Pass. The B truck rolled over and the driver was in the process of getting stung multiple times. Maybe he lost his life, but some of the crew rolled up and rescued this driver. They got stung multiple times themselves, so certainly acted in that first responder capacity. Okay, so let's make sure that we know just a little bit about the roles and responsibility of the players. The project owner is typically a designated representative of the local highway agency, typically a project manager. It might be one of the commission. It just depends on how the agency wants to address who the representative of the owner should be. But the project owner does represent the interests of the local agency and has the ability to make decisions upon the agency's behalf. The design team leader, if this is a project that is being designed, you're going to apply a roadway safety audit to the design portions. Certainly we want to identify that design team leader, and we need a leader in design to be able to interpret questions that the roadway safety audit team might have of the design, especially when they go and do their field review. Certainly the roadway safety audit team and team leader is an integral independent role, and that leader needs to be well defined as well. So we need to open up the lines of communication as to what the protocols of communication are, so we don't get bogged down on I call communication confusion. And we talk about the integration of the roadway safety audit process and how that all works together with the project owner, the design team, and the roadway safety audit team itself. But these are the major players: project owner, design team leader, if your project is being designed, and the roadway safety audit team and its leader. So which projects should get an RSA and when? Which should be selected? Consideration should be given to the phase a potential RSA project is in. And so here are the 4 phases to consider. So let's just kind of work our way down through these. Roadway safety audits can be applied to the pre-construction phase. These are typically projects that are under design, and we want to be able to look at the design, visualize it, and audit the design and roll in any roadway safety elements that might be missing in the design. Again, the design can be sound. It can meet all kinds of the standards that we need to meet. However, there are still safety issues. Again, it looks great on paper for moving traffic, but what about moving traffic safely? The construction phase, believe it or not, you can do a roadway safety audit while the project is being built. You're getting late in the game, because if you discover things that need to be changed, you're going to find yourself writing change orders during construction, and change orders can be very expensive. I spent a good chunk of my life at ITD doing construction and managing construction projects. And as the assistant state construction engineer, I found all kinds of change orders coming in to change the project to incorporate elements of safety, and usually they were getting pretty costly at that point, but they were necessary for us to improve safety, and actually paid good benefit in the long run. You just had to be prepared to pay for it. So in the construction phase, you can do an RSA. You're starting to get really late in the game. When I refer to the post-construction phase, I'm talking about the existing roadway. So we're not really designing anything now. We want to go out and do a roadway safety audit on an existing roadway or an existing intersection. And so when we talk about the post-construction phase of performing a roadway safety audit, those are the things I'm talking about. And then finally, the 4th one we consider on performing a roadway safety on is that land development phase. Large land developer comes in and is required to change the elements of your roadway, and changing those elements of your roadway or adding to your roadway, you know, are there some safety items that we want to try to discover and address? So drilling this down just a little bit further, when we look at the roadways and the projects, it should get an RSA. When we look at the pre-construction phase or a roadway that's undergoing design, we can break that into 3 distinct elements. We can talk about the planning phase. Got all of our bright ideas, and we're putting pens and pencils to paper and maps and thinking about what we want to do, either to the existing roadway, whether we're widening it or completely reconstructing it, all the way to putting a brand new roadway out in the middle of nowhere. That transitions to preliminary design, preliminary design is thought of as laying out line, grade, existing roadway features, capitalizing upon expanding those, and you get to about the 30% point of your design or redesign. And then final design is when you're putting a bow on it. I've gotten to final design and I'm getting ready to put a package together to go out and bid the project and go to construction. The ideal time to drop in an RSA is right at that preliminary design stage. The late stages of planning, and when you're into preliminary design, because enough of the project is known and enough of the details of the project are laid out that the roadway safety audit team can understand what's going on, and they can really sink their teeth into the project and have a clear understanding of what those safety elements may or may not be included in the preliminary design. Final designs get a little late in the game. If you discover issues of safety that need to be incorporated into your design, you find yourself backing up the train. If you're designing the project in-house with in-house staff, staff's not going to be really super happy, but you can back up the train fairly easily. If you're having a design consultant you're working with, the design consultant is going to say, it's kind of beyond my scope of work to back up the train, and it may cost you money to back up the train and dial in those elements of safety into your design. Conversely, when we talk about construction and the construction phase, you can certainly do roadway safety audits on complex work zones. Sometimes that's overlooked, and actually it's kind of paid some dividends on those work zones that tend to be complex in nature. Part of my work, what I do in the afterlife here after ITD is several functions. One, I do expert witness work, and I was recently involved in a trial with work zones that probably could have benefited from an RSA. It was with the local highway district. We actually did prevail in the end. It was a jury trial. But there is some merit to doing that. You can do a roadway safety audit during the construction stage, but again, you're getting very late in the game, because if you're going to incorporate those safety issues you're uncovering, you're probably going to start writing change orders. And you're getting really super late in the game if you do a roadway safety audit, the pre-opening of the roadway project. So if you're doing a brand new project and it's already been built, you can actually go do an audit. If you're going to incorporate elements of safety that might have been missed, it's going to be very expensive. Doable, but very expensive. Post-construction, again, we're talking about existing roads and existing intersections. We're not really redesigning anything. We're going out to look at the safety issues and how the existing roadways are operating and how those existing intersections are operating. And then finally, land development. When we look at land development usage, the development of RSAs may be conducted on industrial, commercial, or residential land use development projects that may have an impact on the characteristics of your roadway, or the adjacent roadways. Development projects have a great potential to change the traffic volumes, traffic patterns, the vehicle mix, especially in commercial environments, the road environment, and user perception of the roadway. So when you factor all of that together, a roadway safety audit in a land development project may have some benefits. So it's important to start linking up with planning and zoning departments to look at highway safety projects proactively and look towards the future and what those impacts might be that the developments will have on highway safety. Okay. So we are right on time. I cannot believe my good luck. So we're coming up to the top of the hour right now, and we're going to end today by doing a chat room and reporting back. And then once we report back, I want to spend just a minute or two to give you a preview of what tomorrow looks like, and then we will let you go. So with that, we'll want to break into small groups, our chat rooms again, to discuss, are you currently invited to be involved in the design reviews of projects, and or is your advice sought? Should you be involved? If so, how? So I'll ask Dawn to throw that one up there and set up our chat. And then we'll come back to discuss.
Been asked to join any RSA.
So we're going to break back out into our rooms. And then we're going to talk about, are you currently invited to be involved in the design reviews of projects, and or is your advice sought? Should you be involved? And if so, how? So we'll send you back to your groups, and we'll ask that one person. So everybody should be joining the main session again. And we're going to ask that we get a representative from each of the groups.
So pretty much everybody, I guess I'll just start. Pretty much everybody in my group were involved in this, in the process, or asked their opinion about things, and their advice was sought, especially when you're talking about a county. They're the maintenance people. They are asked what will work, what won't work. Will different treatments have different issues, and when you're maintaining it, what's going to come up? And then I had another person in a small city who's involved in a lot of stages, because in small cities and counties, you often have to wear a lot of hats. And so you're involved quite a bit. And our group agreed that it would be best if their advice was sought early on, so you didn't get too far in the process before some issues could be brought up.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, and for our group, we had a member from LHTAC and the Association of Highway Districts, so we're not involved in the process necessarily, but we know how to get you in contact with folks who do, and that's a good role for us. However, we did have somebody, an operational engineer for the federal highways, and she's very involved, especially with the design and construction. They seek her comments and she reviews projects and everything, which is appropriate. And then also a street worker for a street department, and the street supervisors are mainly involved, and he thinks that that's appropriate that they are in that level. And then another woman from County Road and Bridge, she's an office manager and helps with running equipment. So she's not completely involved right yet, still kind of new, but is hoping to have, after these classes, more of a role. Thank you.
Thanks, Savannah.
I'll go. I was a little surprised in our group that there wasn't very much involvement on the part of anyone else. But you know, on our commission in Ada County, I believe we get involved more and more all the time, because we're the ones, believe it or not, from some of you smaller highway districts, we're the ones that are personally held responsible for every screw up in the county on the roads. So if we don't want to get involved, we're stupid. And if we do get involved at the earlier public information meetings, or even before that, when we talk to some of our staff who are talking about plans going forward, we can make sure that there are design features engineered into every road that we look at, so that safety is considered earlier and more than perhaps might be otherwise. Thanks.
Any other groups who would like to speak up? Brian, can I pick on you again for our group?
Sure. So some of our members weren't involved. I hope that, you know, in the future they can get more involved, because that's the best time when you're doing a design review to speak up. Either that's by position or current way they're organized. I help with a lot of projects because I'm a safety engineer at LHTAC. So the projects that I am working on, we do design reviews. And like I told my group, we try hard to spot those things during design, because that is kind of the whole point of doing a design, is to address as many problems as you can. But some things are not apparent until it is built and goes live, and then you see what went wrong. That's the experience I have.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Okay, so has everybody had a chance to report out? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get back to sharing my screen here. And indeed, yeah, I think it's very important and very valuable that individuals who are very close to the roadway have their advice sought and be part of design reviews and review of projects and actually become part of the RSA team. Really super quick personal story. I was assistant district engineer in District 6. I like to get out and circulate around. And during severe winter storms, it was the Siberia of Idaho over there. I had the opportunity to get up and ride in snowplows. I had people who asked me or offered to let me drive their plow. One, I don't have a commercial driver's license, and two, I didn't want to explain to the great state of Idaho how I ruined a $150,000 plow. But it really opened my eyes as to what individuals who are operating the highway face and what their challenges were. So it's great to get back down at that grassroots level and seek the advice of individuals who are very close to the roadway. Okay, so as promised, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. I'm going to advance to one more slide. I'm going to give you just a super quick preview. Tomorrow, we're going to get into the meat of things. We're going to discuss now very clearly in detail how we conduct an RSA. This is what everybody's been waiting for. It's like baking a cake. So bring your mixing bowl and your stir spoons. We're going to go down and identify the project. We're going to select the team. We're going to have a pre-audit meeting. We're going to go out into the field and look at it. We're going to do an analysis of what we found and prepare a report. We're going to present those findings to the roadway owner. We're going to let the roadway owner prepare a response, and then we're going to look at how these things get incorporated into projects. So it's kind of a step-by-step process. We've talked a lot today about what RSAs are, how we might go about implementing those, how pilot projects look like, policies, and so on. Tomorrow, we're getting into the meat of it. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Lori and Dawn to close us out for the day, and we'll be done for the